Chapter 6. Caden. Stepping out of the small bathroom, Gray smiled and said, "You're going to need a shower because I need to have sex with my man at least once a day." "Oh, really? Do tell." I didn't know Gray was that oversexed. I'd say he hid that well. You learned a lot about a man when it came to sex, and it was through sex that would determine if you were meant to be together, and I'd say we were made for each other and would be lost if we weren't in each other's life. I was placing a fresh polo over my head when I glanced over at him. He'd actually called me his man. I couldn't believe it. Before he thought I was a boy, and I wondered what had changed his mind. I sat down in my chair behind my desk. Gray found a seat and placed it in front. "I came here to ask you about Sean, but there is no need for that anymore. I want us to be closer than we have been. I want you as my partner, and I need to know if you're all right with that." "I want the same things, but I have so many responsibilities that I don't know if I'll be able to give you the attention I need to now," I admitted. "I don't want to block your chances of being happy, if you're happy with." "Don't say it, Cade. I could never be happy with Austin." "I know that's what you wanted to say, and take that from your mind. It's over between us. It was over the day he moved in with me in New York, but I didn't want to admit it. I thought I needed something from him that he couldn't give, his devotion and honesty. He didn't have either, and I chose to overlook it." "But you have a child together." "Another mistake I made with Austin. Not Amy, but Austin. You should see her and how beautiful she is." "I did when you were in New York with Austin. Lane was staying over with Scott until you and Austin returned from that trip," I said, not wanting to betray Scott and Lane, because they wanted me to see how precious Amy was, and if I had any doubts about having children, holding her in my arms would dispel any apprehension. Well, it worked, and I fell in love with her. "When you close up tonight, come over, and if you're tired and just want to get into bed, then that's not a problem. I'm up most of the night because that's when Amy wants to play. I just want to know that you're in my bed." "Who else's bed would I be in?" This is all I've ever wanted, I needed to say to him, but I didn't. Gray looked over at me with those big, beautiful blues, reached over the desk past my computer, and held my hand. "I want you to be with me. Near me. Sleeping next to me. With my little girl in the next room. Like a family. Is that all right with you? Just say yes, and I promise you that I will do anything to make you happy." "I'm happy now. You don't have to do more. Just remind me that I'm not dreaming." "You're not dreaming," he said when a knock came to the door. I quickly stood, headed for the door, and opened it to see Lane standing in the doorway. "You're not dreaming," Lane quipped. "You can't see in here, but the walls are thin. You should plan on reinforcing them when you get that shower put in, and knock out the wall, and move your office further back if you're going to have sex here. Smells like—" "Don't say it," I interrupted. "I didn't ask for a structural analysis of my office." "Try not to lean your ear on the door," I warned. Then I remembered he was married to a nurse, and there wasn't much that escaped Lane or shocked him. "What is it?" "Remember you said that we needed to hire more people. Well, I have a young man who needs a job. He said he discovered he had no money when he got off the bus in Nevermore, and he'd planned on staying a while until he could save enough to pay his way to the east. Can you take care of that? I'm busy now. Where is Brian?" I knew I'd missed him when I sauntered in late another hapless morning. He'd be the first to give me lectures on how, when you were the boss, you didn't have a life. I didn't listen, and because of that, I was paying the price. "Brian said that you didn't mind if he took off for a few weeks." I remembered saying, "A week." I could spare him only a week. He had something to take care of, and you and I know what that is. Lane rolled his eyes. What I knew was I needed Brian now, because my life had taken a sudden turn for the better, and things were looking up, and I felt great. Gray stood and said, I have to go. When you're a new father, your life isn't your own. You need to try it, Lane. I can tell the way Scott is with Amy, that he's waiting for you to say the word. Well, we both have to work. We don't have the income of 2 lawyers. Gray didn't say anything. He leaned over and kissed me before heading for the door and closed it behind him. Did you really have to say that? No. But until you and him are living in the same house and Austin is out of his life and yours, I just like reminding him that 2 is company and 3 is a crowd in any situation, and with Austin, it's more like a toxic situation any way you look at it. Now what's up with Brian, and why did you give him time off? He's not a paid employee like yourself, and he could have left any time he chose, and it was good on his part to ask me, and what could I say? No, I want you to keep slaving here, Brian, because I can't spare you? Even that won't fly, and it's best to let him think that he had to ask. Will you be available after lunch to interview this guy? He's young and cute and from LA. You know the type, the kind you find his face and blonde hair, plastered all over a billboard selling shit you don't need. I'm young and blonde, Lane cut me off in the middle of my comparison. Yeah, but there are blondes and there are blondes, and you're the domesticated kind you see from the Midwest, you know, the farmer kind. This guy has been in a city all his life, and he looks kind of worldly like Gray or Austin, God forbid. So you came to these conclusions, how? I talked to him, and he said he was from California. We FaceTimed, and boy is he gorgeous. I'm happy Brian isn't here, because he'd be trying to ask him out on a date, and you know that would be fucked up. I already had to fire one of the baristas because Brian fucked him and promised him a position without talking to me, or running it by you. In our next office meetings, we have to set boundaries for these young men and women. Do not fraternize during work hours and stay off your phones. No TikTok and Instagram. Lane appeared frustrated, but he was always like that when he thought no one listened to him. Can we cancel that meeting this week? Lane narrowed his glance. You heard nothing I said. I heard everything, but I need to get some rest, and I'm staying over with Gray until further notice, starting tonight when we close. Okay. I guess you're the boss. That I am, and because I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. I'm going to make the best of this day and not complain about how tired I am. And there is no way in hell that I'll let Austin bother me. Walking to the shutters, I took a look to see what I'd missed, and I was proud of myself and my friends for the work they'd put in, making my shop the talk of the town. I sighed, because I still couldn't figure out how to make my success work for me like Brian, and unlike Brian, I couldn't just walk away. Then, like Dracula, who wouldn't die and came back like a bad movie sequel, in walked Austin and Zack, the bride of Dracula, or was that the bride of Frankenstein? What the fuck? I didn't have the luxury of staying in my office, and I had to take up the slack and do some work, and just when I had to get behind the coffee bar and act like a barista, 2 of the most disgusting men I'd had the misfortune of meeting in my young life were taking a seat at the bar. As I walked out, watching Lane waving me on and complaining that I had 2 customers, only because he couldn't tolerate Austin, and he probably didn't know that the man who came in with him was Zack, my fake boyfriend. Zack had a small beard that appeared to have gotten out of control, because it didn't grow in some spots. When I walked behind the bar and tried to ignore them and prayed someone else would wait on them, Zack said, "Who do I have to kiss to get a cup of coffee?" Austin, who appeared to be upset over his choice of words, probably would have been more upset if Zack had said what he most likely wanted to say, which would have been, "Who do I have to fuck to get anything around here?" The young waiter who I knew as Marty rushed over to Zack with a smile, taking his order, and there I was, saved once more. However, Austin turned to me and said, "Are you going to ignore me the whole time?" I thought one admirer was enough for one man. Or is Zack too flirty for you, and isn't giving you enough of his attention? When Zack heard his name, he turned away from Marty after Marty had placed 2 coffees with whipped cream in front of Austin and Zack. As Austin was saying something to me, I wasn't concentrating on him, but the look on Zack's face and what he had said to Marty. "I hope my coffee is sweet. I like sweet things." Then he licked his lips and Marty turned away, more embarrassed than turned on. Marty was 18 and barely out of high school and probably not gay, and Zack, a 40-year-old gay man, should have known better, but he didn't. This may have been the first time in Zack's life he'd landed a man like Austin, and he still wasn't satisfied, and it served Austin right for choosing a flirt like Zack. When I turned back to listen to Austin, I thought these two deserved each other. "And you know I have visitation rights with Amy, but I haven't paid my child support, and if you could talk to Grayle, then I'd appreciate it." No, he wasn't asking me to talk to Grayle about his baby and child support. Finally, Zack stopped watching Marty long enough to concentrate on Austin. "Baby, buy me one of those yummy scones to go with my coffee. The one with the berries. Doesn't it look yummy?" He pointed and nuzzled up to Austin, who appeared to be a sucker for Zack. Zack was well past 40 and he was acting like a boy of 18. Perhaps there was more going on that I wasn't privy to, but Zack sounded ridiculous with his looks and that baby voice. That obviously wasn't the same man who got pissed easily at any little thing. What one man would do for one man and wouldn't for another baffled me. Yet I was lucky Gray and Austin didn't have a loving partnership. "I can't talk to Gray about you not paying your fair share of child support. I'm an outsider when it comes to your child, and even when I marry Gray." "Did he ask you to marry him?" "No." And that was when I saw a sigh of relief. He'd sucked in a deep breath and let it out when I said no. I knew then that he'd had second thoughts about Gray. Austin was a man that wanted to hold too many things in one hand, and eventually he'd lose everything. There was no way he'd hold Zack without money and Gray if he didn't have Amy, and for some reason he was short on money and long on BS. Looking at the time of day, they both should have been working, and they weren't. I didn't expect Zack to work anywhere that made sense because he'd already revealed to me that he couldn't keep a job to save his life, but I thought Austin had an excuse. He was out of his element living in Nevermore, and unless he tried very hard and got lucky he wouldn't be working here, because there were too many lawyers in Nevermore. I think there were maybe 5 in the town, and that was too many. "Austin, I'll speak to Gray about that tonight." He raised an eyebrow, because it appeared he didn't expect me to say that. I turned and walked away, because Lane was calling me about an interview I'd forgotten about.